Hi, everyone. We are live today on the LSU Ag Center page. Thank y'all for joining us. We'll wait for a few people to log in. My name is Anna Rebeck. I'm the social media strategist for the LSU Ag Center. And I want to welcome y'all today to the live 2021 Turkey Update with Brett Collier, LSU Ag Center Associate Professor of Wildlife Ecology. Thanks, Brett, for being here.
Not a problem. Glad to be here today.
And guys, we are having some technical difficulties. Michael Chamberlain's also supposed to join us, but if he comes on later, great. But Brett is here for y'all. And for everyone just joining us, we are going to be talking about turkeys today. It's about to be turkey season in Louisiana, and Brett is going to give us some 2021 updates. You take it away.
Oh, absolutely. So Anna's going to kind of lead off with this, and I hope Mike, he'll probably hop on here in a little bit, but I'm fairly certain that he's either making his way to or is at a place where he's going hunting maybe tomorrow. I don't know. So technical difficulties is what it is. I'm fairly certain that I can carry a 45-minute conversation, so that should be all right. So where do you want to start at? Do you want to start with kind of what we saw from reproductive ecology 2020, and then maybe touch over into COVID a little bit? And hey, Mark, and then maybe we'll kind of step from there, talk a little bit about the hurricane that hit Louisiana, just Hurricane Laura, because it kind of went through one of our study sites, and then kind of wrap up with, what we're doing and where we're heading in 2021, just generally speaking. Okay. All right, so I'm probably going to refer back to Anna a little bit so I can keep my place. She's my marker for today. So, well, I guess first things probably everybody's interested in is how did reproduction look last year? And I'll caveat that just generally speaking with there's a lot of talk going on in the woods, a lot of talk with biologists all across the southeastern United States and even out west. Wondering kind of what the relative implications of the pandemic had on the birds. So generally speaking, really, hey, Tommy, really high level stuff. So we don't know what the actual implications of the pandemic is going to be on turkeys. I'm going to give you guys tonight, I'll talk a little bit more speculative about things that we think we know, and some of the issues that might kind of come up and things that we're monitoring right now. Hey, what's going on? So just kind of give you guys a broad perspective is kind of where I'm going to go. So everybody knows that kind of COVID, the pandemic, hit us last year, right about start of turkey season in most of the Southeast. Pretty much when you think about it, everybody got real nervous and things started generally getting locked down March. I want to say it was around March 12th or 13th. And in a lot of states, turkey season, Florida was already open, but in a lot of states, turkey season was just getting ready to open. And generally speaking, broad, and I'm going to paint some very, very broad paintbrushes here, everybody. So don't think that I'm talking about your particular backyard or exactly what happened on this one single WMA. But generally speaking, what we saw was a pretty significant increase in, hunter participation. License sales were up pretty high. Last year, ranging anywhere from, in some states they were up about 10%. Some states saw a 30% increase in, licenses or turkey tags and that kind of stuff, because it was kind of this weird perfect storm where turkey hunting season coincided with nobody being able to go to work, right? So then all of a sudden you had a bunch of people like me going, what am I going to do? I'm going to go turkey hunting today. Well, I didn't go turkey hunting. I taught and worked every day, very hard. Very hard. Sure. Doing science, right? So that happened, and what we saw was kind of a broadly speaking, we saw a general increase in turkey harvest across southeastern United States. Now I'm not going to say that every place was up 35% because that's not true, right? Some places, Louisiana was, I want to say up about 8 to 10% over last year, over the previous year, so over 2019. Other states were 20% up. Some states, I think, were up almost 30%. And then some states were actually fairly consistent. If I'm not mistaken, I think Mississippi was within a few hundred birds of their long-term running average. So there was some variability in the Southeast, and we also saw that in the Midwest and some of the northeastern states where turkey harvest was up. In some states it was flat, in the others we didn't really see a whole lot that just dropped off entirely, with the exception of states that are destination states, like say Texas.
Okay.
People that license sales for non-resident, because Texas is a very big destination state for Rios, right? Everybody wants to go turkey hunt and hunt Rios, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So Jason Harden, a turkey biologist from Texas, got me some data a while back, and I want to say that their non-resident hunting license sales were down something like 80-85%.
Wow.
And we've got an ongoing study in Texas where we're putting leg bands on lots of birds, and usually we get 120-ish back a year. They're harvested, legally harvested, and return, called in by hunters. Last year, I think we got 4. So there were just a lot fewer people in the woods turkey hunting. Yeah. In Texas, right? But some states had increases. Lots of people had to stay home, so they hunted close to home.
Right.
The Southeast was open earliest, so it got there's a little more effort, I think, in the Southeast United States. So what does that mean, kind of going forward? Well, we don't really know at this point. We're monitoring it this year and next year, and we're talking to all the state wildlife agencies. Some of our concerns, which Mike and I have voiced previously, is we're concerned about the implications it might have on reproduction. We're also concerned about the implications it may have just on the number of turkeys that are out there, because as everyone knows, wild turkey kind of reproduction has been declining over the last 10 or 15 years across the Southeast, and in other places as well. And when you kind of put declining reproduction on, and then add kind of on top of it additional harvest, we don't know where we're going to make the new birds at. But there's additional complication here.
Okay.
That is probably worth bringing up with regard to COVID is land management. And what happened, I'm an employee of the state of Louisiana.
Right.
And what happened is a lot of our state and federal partners that we work with on turkey science and all that kind of stuff, they weren't able to go do their jobs. And that includes things such as, they weren't able to harvest, do timber sales, harvest timber, weren't able to put fire on the ground. So a lot of prescribed burning kind of got pushed back a year. And most people think, well, that's not that big of a deal, we'll just do it next year. But, we're next year, and, it's starting to get done. But problem is turkeys have a pretty tight window of vegetative communities that they like to nest in. And, the bulk of them nest in stuff that's burned about 2 years ago. Some will nest in stuff that's burned, 1 year ago. But once it gets, especially in the Southeast, to kind of 3 or 4 years, especially post-burn, then it's not exactly optimal turkey nesting habitat. So that kind of difference, well, Tanya, I think that's fantastic. I'm going to come visit you. Tanya says there's turkeys everywhere in Western Tennessee. Yeah, yes, there are. And there's been a couple of projects actually. Yep. There's been a couple of projects actually going on in Tennessee on turkeys. I think that the University of Tennessee has a project going, and I think that Tennessee Tech is starting up a big banding project to look at harvest rates in Tennessee soon. So, but as I was saying, so we saw this thing where a lot of management didn't get done on our public lands, for which a lot of us use for turkey hunting. And the implications for that are unknown, but that's actually something that we're pretty well positioned to monitor, because most of us that are doing turkey research have a pretty nice mixture of public and private lands that we're working on. So we can kind of see if we see any impacts of that over the next 2 to 3 years. So,
okay.
That
should be interesting.
I'm sorry, say that again.
What about the hurricanes?
Oh, yeah. So I tell you what, let me talk about what we saw from production and everything last year in Louisiana, and then kind of generally across the Southeast. And then I'll talk about the Hurricane Laura, which is, I think, the one that's specific to what you want to talk about, right? So generally for production in Louisiana, just because we've got a bunch of graduate students out running around, it was fair this past year. I haven't seen what I would call a truly outstanding year in the last 6 or 7s, but I would say fair is maybe not the right term, moderate. We had some locations that had really high nest success, getting up in the 45% range, which is these days not very regular. And that was kind of in some of our southeast study regions. We saw the area kind of west central Louisiana where we're doing a lot of work. Think basically West Alexandria, out there in the National Forest area, all the way down to Fort Polk. They came in about the average, about 25, 28% on nest success.
Okay.
We tracked a lot of broods last year, though. Most of our nests that we were monitoring that hatched, their broods did really good in the state last year. We had a bunch of students. We had a young man from Tennessee Tech come down, and his graduate student up there is working on brood ecology. And he came in, and I think he got 22 or 23 broods that he did local scale, fine scale vegetation sampling on. And we had a really good brood year last year. So generally speaking, I'm fairly confident and fairly pleased with where, and Cody Sedtall, turkey biologist for the state, obviously would be the number one go-to guy for the state's thoughts on it. But, from my little research hole that I kind of looked through, I think that, in Louisiana, at least turkeys are doing pretty good. We had good production last year. Across most of the rest of the Southeast, projects in Georgia, that I'm affiliated with, stuff in South Carolina, stuff in North Carolina. We saw some data from Kentucky, and I know that there's some work going on in Tennessee, and I want to say Arkansas and Mississippi have some stuff they're monitoring as well. So across the board, generally speaking, I'd say that average was what production was last year. Wasn't too high, wasn't too low. There were some local pulses and some local holes, but overall, I think that, production was about what we expected to see. Now, that doesn't mean that it was a big pulse, and we suddenly got a whole bunch of extra production. We maintain status quo. So that's generally where we're at. The hurricane, so most of you probably know, just because obviously I'm at LSU, the Hurricane Laura came through kind of western Louisiana and basically kind of ran just straight up the west side of the state, and it went right through Lake Charles, headed all the way up through Shreveport, and in addition to the loss of homes and livelihoods and families in need and all that kind of stuff, it put a pretty good smack on some of the regions that we study turkeys in west central LA and the Kisatchie National Forest and some of the Forest Service units out there. The Forest Service and the state agencies have been really proactive on what they're going to do. So there's problems whenever the timber falls down. Sometimes it's more difficult to salvage. They can't get in to salvage it. So they're trying to do some work where they're getting fire on the ground, trying to clean up some of that deadfall. Probably it's going to take a few years. Whenever we can get in and get enough of it managed, enough of it burned and that kind of stuff, it's going to have opened up a lot of areas that, we're going to get herbaceous growth on the ground in the short term. And then probably there's going to be replanting, hopefully in longleaf, in some cases. But, obviously they'll probably put loblolly out as well. In the longer term. So we'll be working on transitioning some of that forest damage, back into the, more moderate to older growth forest that it historically has been. It's going to take a combination of fire out there. They're going to have to use it, and then some salvage, some industrial forestry practices to try and get in there. And I think that, everybody, both industry and the Forest Service, are working real hard on identifying targets for where that work can be done. And it also, and what it basically comes down to, at least in that area, is usable space. And you always want to have more space, and turkeys don't like to walk through things as much as people think they do. So we want them to be able to walk through it. They don't want to just be hopping over logs left and right. So I think the number I want to say that I saw was 750 to 800,000 acres of vegetation that was damaged. And probably of most concern to myself personally is the fact that fantastic, Mark, that's awesome, is the fact that the riparian corridors, where hardwoods are at, just got smashed. Those big, all the oak trees and roosting habitat just got knocked over, and they're effectively, in many cases, unusable. And I think we saw some of that during trapping this year, because we actually had the best, fastest trapping season in the Copulations National Forest we've had since I moved here in 2014. I mean, the Louisiana Department of Wildlife Fisheries staff that kind of, oversee the trapping and working, and then my graduate students assist them on it. We just had birds. I mean, every time we put out a bait site to try and, get some birds on it, we have birds on it. So, I mean, our problem this year was actually we had too many birds, not too few birds. Yeah. And it was I think it was very much so because some of those, riparian corridor habitats that usually kind of hole up in, eat acorns in, get that hard mass in the winter, just weren't available to them anymore.
Okay.
So, I don't think that the hurricane is going to have drastic, immediate impacts. There'll probably be some long-term implications that, we're keeping an eye out for, but I think that everybody's pretty comfortable on what we're doing over there. So, hey, now that Mal Collier guy, I don't think we can trust him a bit.
Howdy from
Hi, Dad. So, yeah, he's getting geared up for turkey season too. So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I was just going to ask you about what kind of research have y'all been working on this spring? What have y'all been up to?
So, all right, hang on. Darren's jumped in here and wants me to send the coordinates for those trap sites. So, Darren, let me tell you something. We get one of the most regular questions that my graduate students and most of us that do this, graduate students, get whenever turkey hunters are out scouting and they run across the LSU truck or the University of Georgia truck or South Carolina truck or wherever, is, hey, where are them turkeys you tracking at? And the response my graduate students are supposed to give is one of two things. It's either, oh, they're over there a little bit, or, oh, we just saw some about 4 miles back that way on the right. So that's where they're at. They're over there a little bit or back on the right. So, but Darren, to be honest with you, we had birds on bait all over. It's just, the only recommendation for you I'd give is get off the road. Because we were working pretty far off the roads on some of our trap sites, but yeah, we had lots of 2-year-olds. We caught and saw a lot of 2-year-olds, a lot of 2-year-old males this year. Saw a lot of 2-year-old males this year, and then mainly caught adult females whenever we were trapping. We didn't catch as many juvenile females as I expected, but yeah, there are birds out there. So I'll send you some pictures if you want to, just to show you that I can prove it. We got pictures of them. So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just asking you, what have y'all been working on, you and your grad students this spring?
Oh, yeah. So we got a lot of, and if Mike was here, he'd jump in here too. So I'll kind of give you the really cool broad overview. We got a lot of neat collaborative projects right now that myself at LSU and then my friend Mike at the University of Georgia are working on. And they're really, really good for providing information on just basic turkey biology, but also, we're trying to ask some questions that we really haven't been able to ask since restoration. So probably in Louisiana, we've got, some real exciting studies we've been doing. We've been monitoring eastern wild turkeys in the kind of west central Copulations National Forest, Peace-on Ridge, Fort Polk region since about 2014. Okay. So we've built this very sizable, very detailed data set working with the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, Cody, the turkey biologist over there, and then, Scott and Kenny are obviously well engaged from the administrative perspective of the work. Basically looking at what we can do to better manage, turkeys in these, forested pineland systems, under, regular hunting pressure. What kind of vegetative communities can we bring to, work on creating? Where are these birds going to go brood at? We're spending a lot of time focusing on brooding ecology right now. Okay. Interesting. We'll have our 4th year of gobbling chronology data. We've been doing a little side project where we're collecting some gobbling data just in Copulations. That's been real successful, and we're real proud of that project. Right now, it's probably the longest term consistent single location data set that exists on the species. Just length of time. South Carolina's got a pretty strong one from the Webb Center WMA, and we're collecting more every year at some other sites. Southeast LA is a little different of a system. Okay. We've got almost all of our work in West Central Louisiana is on public land, big forested tracts. Southeastern Louisiana is a much different system. We're talking the North Shore area of Pontchartrain, much more fragmented habitats, much more fragmented vegetative conditions. forested. Oh, Jeffrey, you are not kidding, man. I'll tell you a story about that in a minute. Forested, not as much, contiguous forest, lots of open pasture, lots of open ag. Bird movements are a lot different. We see a lot more linear corridor style movements than we do clusters on the landscape because they're following where there's timber at, where they can move through those riparian corridors. And to be honest with you, it's it's important that we're doing work in non-heavily forested areas, because if you guys think about if you just go and open Google Maps, right, pick your state and zoom in on it. If you're not in a national forest or some sort of public land holdings really aren't that big, generally speaking. There's industrial forests that are out there, but there's not just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres of contiguous contiguous industrial forest. So what we're really dealing with is we're trying to be proactive. The Louisiana Department of Wildlife Fisheries has always been fairly proactive when it comes to management of game species. They're leading the charge on looking at issues like pushing back season starting dates a little bit to try and increase the number of males that are being bred, and the number of males that are breeding females. And a lot of other states are actually just now starting to think about those regulations. South Carolina's got some regulations that are moving. Arkansas has as well, but Louisiana's been doing that for years. I think we're in the third or fourth year now. And then on top of that, landscapes are changing. The landscape that this bird was originally existed in and then was restored to does not look the same anymore. So by being proactive and looking at these areas where you've got this kind of ex-urban rural gradient that's slowly getting cut down into and we see it in agriculture all the time too, right? The average family farm's like 50 acres. That kind of thing. So, by being proactive and looking at what's going on, the state can better plan for what are we going to need to be doing management wise in the future. So, so it's been good. So that project is really coming along well. We're spending a lot of time chasing birds. They're in Washington, Tangipahoa, St. Tammany parishes. We may have some in Livingston. I think they get pretty close to the edge there. And it's been real successful. And Jeff, just Mr. Caston, just to address your dream job quote, you are absolutely right. And if you think about it, I get to get up every day and I wake up thinking about turkeys. I go to bed thinking about turkeys. I get paid cash money to think about turkeys, and it's great. And what's great is with the fact that I get to think about turkeys and that I'm a turkey fanatic. Even when I go on vacation, I get to do fun things like go hunt turkeys. So I'm literally living the dream. Hey, Jeff, my buddy Jeff Craig is on there. It's good to see you, Jeff. Not really. Let me caveat that with we did, and I think that, Jeff, if I'm not mistaken, your question is, did male survival decline due to increased hunting effort that occurred last year versus the years before that, right? It has to, as kind of a global thing. We didn't see that much of an impact on our telemetered males. We didn't see that much of an impact on our telemetered males in the private area. Actually, that's a good one, Mark. I think you can actually pick these up, and I think Anna leaves them on. They can be downloaded off Facebook so other people can watch them.
We uploaded to our YouTube channel as well for the Ag Center.
And we'll make those available. But Jeff, we haven't seen it yet. What I can tell you is for the eastern states, our expectation is that yes, we're going to have, by definition, reduced male survival just because more males from some fixed population size died. They got harvested in some cases, right? We didn't see as much of that in Louisiana, especially harvest rates were pretty flat year to year in the Kisatchie National Forest study area where we got a lot of birds tagged. The southeast region's a lot more private land. So private lands weren't hit as bad there. But on some of our other study sites that are fully on public lands, harvest rates had increased significantly. Where they were at 20, 25%, and now they're 45 and 50%. So I do think that we saw some reduction or some increase in harvest, also reduction generally overall male survival in the southeast United States due to additive harvest, right? More birds got shot. I think that that's agreeable. Now, it's different, as I said earlier, it's different out west, and I can give a pretty global thing here. Out west, where people typically travel to hunt and go to like Hunt Rios or whatever like that, or Merriam's or Gould's or whatever, their pressure was typically reduced. It was reduced due to either states stopped selling non-resident licenses, which I can't pull any off the top of my head. I know there were a couple where they just said, nope, not letting non-residents hunt this year. Maybe Nebraska was one, I think, maybe, or was Kansas, somewhere up there. And then in other cases like Texas, where they just didn't sell the license, people couldn't travel. So I think in those cases, we may see, I don't want to say increased survival, but we saw less harvest, which globally means increase. So yeah, I see Chad, Kansas restricted them. Yep. So I thought it was one of those two. So it was Kansas. Where globally we'll see maybe increased survival in those places, but I don't know. And I do know that a colleague of mine in Kansas is actually starting a project, I think next year, with the Kansas Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit with USGS. I think that I visited with him, and I heard some talk that they were going to start looking at turkey populations out there as well. So, Andrew, I'll come back to you in just a second. And Gerald, you too. So actually, you want me to do them now, the questions now from Gerald and Andrew?
Sure.
Okay, I'm following the thing on the side, guys. So if I miss you, we'll try and circle back at the end. So Gerald wanted to know is there conditions to increase between Cat Island and Tunica? It's a tough road to hoe up there, okay? Potentially, but the problem is we're running into, in that area, we're running into a lot more flooding, a lot more regularly. And this is something that we saw whenever they opened up the spillway in, what was it, 2010, I think. And, we saw basically the spillway opening down in the Morganza spillway when it opened to Louisiana, basically birds died. We didn't have a ton of birds tagged out there. We got a few units out, but I think of the units out, most of them died. They starved to death. They just couldn't, turkeys aren't migratory songbirds, right? They hop up in the trees and they can't live for 20 days in the trees without anything to eat. There's just, but that, there are areas that are coming back up, but the constant flood cycle with not enough upland conditions that are conducive to not getting flooded does potentially cause some problems. And it's the same thing with deer, right? It's just water everywhere. Deer just aren't going to be down there nearly as thick sometimes. So it's possible, but we got more rain, more water's coming down almost every year. It seems like our flooding season is longer and longer every single year. So I think that there's probably sufficient conditions as long as some of it stays dry enough. And that's probably the most wishy-washy answer I can give you, Gerald, because there's so much space there that I'm not sure exactly the exact spot, but I think that there's opportunity. And then Andrew, no, I don't think that the problem is immediately this year. I think that long term, we're probably going to have to watch it a little bit because I don't know what's going to happen to reproduction in that neck of the woods this year. Yeah, it's 2011. Thanks, Darren. I said 10. I don't know what's going to happen with regards to getting fire on the ground and getting some of that deadfall up, and that's going to affect usable space. So probably not going to have a bunch of impact. There's going to be some impact, obviously. But I don't expect to see a massive crash this year. But I think long term that there's the potential for some reductions in population numbers as the forest has to kind of get resituated. Because like I said earlier, turkeys don't like walking over logs, right? That's just not a thing they're going to do. So it gets pretty thick in there. Yeah, Darren, thanks. I said 2010, it was 11, and it did wipe out everything. They are starting to come back. We do have a lot of properties, along the Atchafalaya Delta that are birds are, they're in a spillway. Birds are coming back. We're starting to see them. I know there's these surveys on Sherburne and whatnot that they're starting to find birds out there. There's been some push for putting birds for restocking out there that I've heard, but I don't think that's a viable solution because what happens if you restock them and then the next year it has to open up again? That puts everybody in a put and take situation. And I think that natural regrowth of the population back into the area is the safest way to go. So, and Jared, you absolutely. I'm glad to answer your question anyway. Edward's got a thing on there on Sandy Hollow needing better drinking management. You know, we caught a lot of birds on Sandy Hollow, Edward. Yeah. But Sandy Hollow is a fantastic, and for those of you who aren't familiar, it's WMA and in southeastern Louisiana. It's right in the middle of our study region. We caught a lot of birds on Sandy Hollow. Some of the management of Sandy Hollow is dictated by the land ownership, I think, and that's more of an LDWF question, but it's specifically managed for quail in a lot of that region. They put a lot of fire on the ground. But, oh man, our turkeys are in there, brooding, feeding. We catch them roosting in there, so they do hang out on the edges. But trust me when I tell you this, we have a lot of birds that use Sandy Hollow on a very regular basis. So they may avoid some of the thicker areas, but we see them out there really regularly. So don't write it off. And I already told some friends that if I got a chance, I was going to try and hunt down there this year. So
we have another one. Jeff's our next one.
Yeah, sure. So guys, I'm basically doing the questions as they come up, so I'll get with you. So Jeff, in certain cases, we're identifying cause of mortality whenever we can find the poults, right? Occasionally we'll find poults and snakes, but every once in a while you'll get one that's up in a hole, up in a nest cavity in a tree, usually an owl, or you'll find one that's up in a tree and it's a hawk or something like that. And that's, of course, we don't follow them all day, every day, because we're disturbing them. And with the new GPS technology, and I'll be the first to say this, I don't touch poults anymore, right? Back when I was younger, it was kind of a thing in the turkey world where you grab a poult, you put a tag on their back, and then you let them go and you use telemetry, and they all died. They all, just as usual rule, they all died. We actually, from our perspective, we study the brood now and the brood flock with that GPS tagged hen, because the poults lead the female through the woods, not vice versa. You got to think about the fact that basically the hen is just keeping in between the white lines, right? Don't go over there, you're gonna get ate. Don't go over there, you're gonna get ate. Here's the areas we generally want to go eat, and then the poults lead the female through as they're foraging throughout their day. So where the poults find a place they really want to be, they start pecking away. If we're in there disturbing them, and the story goes, graduate students off in the wood chasing a brood, and you're sitting in the truck watching the brood walk across the road in front of you, right? And I've done that, and my friend Mike's done that. So we're to a point now where we don't like touching those poults anymore. It increases mortality. It breaks up group cohesion. You're stressing out this critter that's that tall. So we treat them as brood. So we're probably not in on them regularly and at a high enough frequency to often identify exactly what ate them. But we do find occasionally remnants of them. If we've got a few tagged, or if the hen gets predated, we'll find, the poult carcasses laying around, as well, that kind of stuff.
Before you answer anything else, I have a question for you on your research that you do. Can people tie these results to y'all's study?
Absolutely. Everything that I do is publicly available. You can email me, you can talk to me. Some of it shows up on Mike Chamberlain's Turkey Tuesday that he does every week. You can get any of it coming to the LSU Ag Center. I will say that the university's changing over the R&R, the School of Renewable Natural Resources website soon, and I don't know how that's going to flesh out yet. So there may be a little downtime, but I'm a public servant, so my email is readily available. I am. I work for the state of Louisiana.
You want me to drop your email in the comments?
Yeah, and if you can drop my email in there, that's fine. And she'll also drop my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You guys can contact me directly via that, and I'll send you stuff that I have, and I don't mind doing that at all. We're trying to get as much information out as possible. That's why we do these talks. Because it's easier to digest me gabbing than I think some of the really dense research stuff we do. But if you just read the introduction and the results, you'll be fine. So, okay. Bill. Bill, that's a great question. So Caddo Parish actually had restoration activities, and Cody's going to kill me, but I want to say they started in around 2012. it was before I was in Louisiana, and I was interacting with Jimmy Stafford, who was a turkey biologist before Cody was, and they had started restoring birds, and that population, I don't really call it population, but that area up there seems to be doing really, really well. Typically, post restoration in lots of places, you see this real pulse and reproduction, and generally speaking, I mean, I don't live in Caddo Parish, obviously, and there may be some locals that have more detailed information, but generally speaking, the news we get is that they seem to be doing okay. And the population in that area seems to be increasing. I don't know if I'd go with like stable yet, because stable is at a much broader scale than just a single parish. But I do think that there's really positive results that are occurring from the kind of local fine scale restoration activities that the Louisiana Department of Wildlife Fisheries did at Caddo Parish. So yeah, I'm interested, and I'll actually, if you remind me or shoot me an email or something, I'll follow up with you, see if I get some more details from the state turkey biologist. Then that's not a problem.
Guys, email and social media handles are in the comments as well, so y'all can annoy them.
Yep, you guys can email me. That's what I do. So, and on Facebook, it's just Brett Collier. No, Joe. That we get this question all the time. And I'll say it, and Lovett Williams in Florida will say has said it. Feral hogs aren't that big of an impact on turkey nests, and I'll say it again: feral hogs are not that big of an impact on turkey nests. Now, I'm not saying that a feral hog will not predate a turkey nest. However, they are typically, as a general rule, they are typically a secondary or a tertiary predator, not the primary. So a bobcat will come in and kill the female, and then the eggs get all stinky, or a raccoon will go and break one open or whatever. And then the hogs will come in and basically clean up. We've done a ton of work on turkey nests in different places, put cameras on them. And when you're talking about a live turkey nest, so this is, and this is an important distinction I want to make here. You're talking about a nest that has a turkey sitting on it. Feral hogs aren't an issue. Now, if you put a stack of 6 chicken eggs, which is called a dummy nest, and people do these studies all the time. You put a stack of 6 chicken or unwashed chicken eggs or unwashed turkey eggs. You put them out in the woods, on the ground, in April or May in the South where it's 80 degrees, what do you think happens? They stink in about 24 hours. And then the pigs find them, and then they eat them, and people get they put cameras out, and they say, okay, feral pigs are a big deal. Feral pigs aren't a predator of wild turkeys as a general rule. Now, there's videos out there, and I've seen pictures of a feral hog grabbing a turkey under a deer feeder and a big boar and that kind of stuff. But as a general rule, they're not cruising through the landscape, just snuffling up turkey nests. Where pigs spend most of their time is kind of their bottomland, riparian corridor, vegetative communities. Turkeys don't nest in those. They nest in the uplands. So while there's crisscrossing, and we do see them on our camera surveys and on our studies that we do, feral pigs are not the predator of turkey nests that everyone thinks they are. It's snakes. It's snakes. Snakes eat eggs. I've got pictures and pictures and pictures of students who go up to a nest, hen will be gone, and there's a snake wrapped around it, just eating the eggs one after another. So I'm sure that feral pigs have some impact. I mean, they got to, and it could range from disease all the way up to just tearing up vegetation, right? I'm sure that at some point feral pigs busted up on a brood and eating a couple of poults. I guarantee it. I mean, it's just nature, right? It's going to happen. But we don't see the level of impacts that most people believe that they should see. And let me see. I hope that answered your question, Joe. Darren, yeah, they're there. Yeah, I mean, we track them. I got a grad student out there right now, Andy, and we're tracking them. We got birds who use it all the time, man. I'm not going to say they're on there today. They might be on there tomorrow. They could be on there next week. I'm really, I'm pleased with how Southeast Louisiana looks as well. So, okay. Bill, I hope so. I hope so. How do I feel about Lake Ramsey? Well, I don't really know her. The area is good. I will defer in that, and Ed, I see your question here, and Tracy, I see yours. I'll defer because I don't want to speak for the state. I don't want to put words into Cody's mouth, who's the state turkey biologist, is actually responsible to everybody. I'm not as familiar with Lake Ramsey as I could be. Bienville Parish, I am because I deer hunt up there. I don't have Bienville Parish is pretty good as far as I'm concerned. It's not it's not covered up. But usually we get recoveries there. But what I would recommend, guys, is the Louisiana Department of Wildlife Fisheries. If you really want to get into this, every year Cody posts kind of the annual report on every parish on how, and I don't know, I don't have the link. Maybe Anna could get it, or we could post it in this after. They post a report with a link to every parish in the state, to harvest numbers. I think it's got polled survey data in it. And there's a real nice report that Cody puts together every year. And rather than me kind of freewheeling it, I'd point you directly to that for site specific questions. Just because I don't want to say the wrong thing and then have my colleagues that work with the wildlife fisheries say, well, Brett, you said this, and it's really not that. So I'd point you there, because as a resource managers, I'm just a scientist, right? As the managers, that some of the stuff that they post is probably applicable to those questions. Is Leon next? Is that
Yep.
right? Okay. Yeah. I don't know, Leon. It's a tough road to hoe. How's this? If we're talking about maximizing hunter satisfaction, then everybody wants to hunt as soon as birds start gobbling, because gobbling is the kind of the driver of hunter satisfaction. People want to be in the woods when they want to start hunting. The regulatory restrictions that were adjusted with regard to season timing was because all the states are seeing productivity declines over decades, and there's concerns that there's a set of issues, and harvest is obviously one of them, right? If you we've talked a lot about the social structure that excuse me, turkeys have in both the males and females, and how it's not like if the top male gets shot, then the next male just steps up the ladder. They have to completely reshuffle, and the female may not want to choose any of them. And we've got evidence, a lot of evidence in both birds generally and turkeys specifically, that earlier nests are more successful and earlier broods are more successful. And if you think about a nest that hatches in April versus one that hatches in June, you're talking about those males and females the next year having a difference of 3 months in age, and that has fitness consequences moving forward. Will it stay that way is not a question for me. My guess is likely, but regulatory decisions are made by your state agency. I think that being proactive, as I hope that everyone sees that we're trying to be, with combining the research and the decision processes, that if it shows that population stability and population increases can be attained with later seasons, then that's typically a win for everybody, because I think everyone would trade increased population size for a little bit of gobbling activity earlier in the season as a general rule. But I don't know. And it's, my distinction, Leon, here is that I don't make regulatory decisions. I collect the data that the state agency needs to make regulatory decisions. My opinion is probably, it's not going to suddenly go to March 15th. In Louisiana, which is as it is in Mississippi. Mississippi has significantly more timber land than we do, significantly more, I think that their state's 60% timbered and ours is significantly less than that. Everything south of I-10 is effectively useless to us. I'm not saying there aren't a few turkeys down there, so there's just a lot of vegetative differences. So that's probably a Cody question if it'll stay that way, but I think there's some good justification for the trade-off between early, hearing a little bit more earlier gobbling and having a larger population size. So I hope that answers that, Leon. And if it doesn't, email me and I'll try and fill you in some more.
Hey, Mr. Leon, by the way, I know him. He's great.
Oh, okay.
Anyways.
Jeff, hang on. So Jeff's in there. Keep the questions coming, guys. I'm glad to answer them. Brood method. Okay. Make it hard to hide mortality, exposure, hypothermia. Not as big a deal down here, Jeff. Rain. So what we want, I saw somebody post the other day, because it's been raining in Louisiana, Mississippi for days, and Mississippi turkey season's open, right? They're just driving down the road with their windshield wipers going. and I hate to say this, I want rain now. I want the rain right now. I want it from now to over the last month. I want rain now, and I want it to get really, really dry in about 3 weeks to a month. 3 weeks, maybe a month, because that's when my poults are going to be coming out. And I want rain early. Give me that vegetation for those birds to hide in, and then I don't want any rain because I want insects and I want my poults to be dry. Hypothermia is not as big an issue for us. Thermal refugia, though, is an issue. We actually, one of the cool studies, Jeff, and if you email, I know you've got my email. If you email me offline, I'll give you some more details, but there's a really cool study where a student that I was talking about earlier from Tennessee Tech came out, and he put these little eye buttons, guys. Think about a little like a watch battery size thermometer out in the woods where we had hens with broods and hens without broods. And he found a really cool, really distinct difference, generally speaking, where the broods were always selecting for cooler thermal environments than the non-brooded hens, which leads me to believe that there is some, thermal cap that these birds are trying to stay out of. So, and that's research that's ongoing because we're trying to figure out, is it mid-story driven? Is it understory driven? Is it overstory driven? What do we need to create to make this type of stuff? So it's in process. We don't get much freezing death or anything like that down here. It's more the upper level of the thermal limits, not the lower. So I hope that got to that, Jeff. Hey, Leon, thank you. Absolutely. Chad Miller. Yeah, so the first one is, if there was one thing you'd like to see state agencies, okay, what would it be? States are doing a lot. And I mean that. And, states get stuck in a really difficult position because they have to balance. And I'm not just talking about Louisiana, I'm talking about all states. They have to balance the interest for, you guys can't see my hands. They have to balance, here we go, the interest of the hunter for recreational harvest with long-term sustainability of the resource for recreational harvest. So you've got this issue where you have people that want to hunt right now and want to harvest, and I'm not being critical, don't take it like they want to hunt right now and they want to harvest a lot of birds and they want to harvest right now and they want to have birds. But the state's mandate is conservation of the species in the longer term than right now. So the work I think that they're doing right now is focused on that. I don't know that that this is something where you stick a thumb in a hole and it plugs the dike sort of thing, where there's no water leaking through and we do one thing and then we're good. I think that it's probably a question of, can we increase the rate and efficiency in which states are able to fund or support vegetation and habitat management on private lands? That's, if there's one thing that could be done better, I think that would be it. And I'm not saying anybody's doing it bad, but I think it's not, maybe better is not the right word, maybe more. Because if it wasn't for private lands, there would not be huntable turkeys in any state. And I challenge anyone on that argument. They just would not have them because most birds exist on private lands. So if there's a mechanism for us to subsidize, and I don't know the right word to be, subsidize, tax incentives, financial support, hell, I laughingly posted something today. I burned the 2 acres of my front yard the other day, right? Just because. Getting fire on the ground, those type of things, then I think that would be an area that I would like state agencies to do. But that comes with a cost, right? And how we get from A to B, I don't know, to answer your question. So I hope that's close. And if it's not, I'll try and fill it back in. And then, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think something needed to be done, Chad, honestly. This bird's my passion. It's what I think about every day. And so I think that those of us that get on here and do this kind of stuff, we're in complete agreement. Stuff needs to be done. And my job is to try and help identify what we might be able to work with and then turn it over to the state agency, and then they facilitate that going forward. So, but I'm in complete agreement with you. We all need to be doing something. That's why I burned 2.2 acres of front yard the other day. Leon likes the late season. Great. I like late season too. I like the early season. I like late season. I like to go out in the woods, but my problem is that most of the time when it's late season or early season, we're busy tracking turkeys around, so I'm pretty busy. Or at least my students are. I'm probably lazier than most people. So, Scott is next.
Yes.
Oh, Scott. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They're over there, man. You're right in the center. And I don't know if you were on earlier, but if you weren't, you should jump on, listen to the beginning of this. That is right in the center of where we're doing work, man. I got birds tagged everywhere out there. We saw a ton of 2-year-old males and caught a whole bunch of adult females this year for research sites. Doing really good. We've been doing research there near Peason and Peason and Old Peason, Kurtwood area for years. Stable, very stable. Probably one of the strongholds of turkeys in the state. And I know I look like I'm not looking at you guys. It's because I've got you all up on the big screen up here. I'm sorry. So very good. Lots of birds. Saw a lot of birds this year. Got a lot of birds on camera. I think it's doing really well. I don't think there's 50,000 extra, but from a population perspective, I think it's really stable and in a real comfortable place right now. So.
Scott also said he graduated with Cody.
Oh, okay. So you know what I deal with every day then, right? What's my thought in introducing Rios to Louisiana? Absolutely not. Period. There's a hard demarcation. If you look at because I cut my teeth studying Rios in Texas for 12 years, the Rios and Easterns over there. There's a very hard demarcation of Rio Grande wild turkeys and Eastern wild turkeys in Texas. And it's basically I-45, the kind of I-45, I-35 corridor that comes out of Dallas-Fort Worth area. There have been a few efforts to put Rios in East Texas, which is stretching the eastern edge of their range a bit. We don't see the typical gray areas that you see in in Kansas and Nebraska, where you get a little bit of melding, and some in Oklahoma don't exist as cleanly down there. And we are way, way, way too east for Rios. Nope, they're a rangeland bird. They may hang out in areas where you got open habitats around riparian corridors, but they are not a forested species, not a bit. And I would, if that were to be put to me in a public forum like this, my answer would be no, absolutely not. They would not do well here. So, yeah, Chad, absolutely. Glad to help. Decision, no. Leon, I see yours, right? Chad, you're welcome. Hang on. Oh, yeah, Leon. No, I don't think I would, Leon. Here's why. That recommendation started with Lovett Williams and his turkey management book that he had written based on the work in Florida. And the concern, which I'm inferring, is burning up nests, right? I would suspect that that's what you're talking about. We've done several studies, and we work in areas that are burned, period. I mean, public lands that we work on and some of the private lands we work on, they are managed with fire. Kisatchie puts a ton of fire on the ground. Our study sites in Georgia and in South Carolina, fire is used a lot. We do not very often burn up turkey nests. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does happen. But I think that the percentage that we've had that we were monitoring that were actually burned was under a couple of percent, maybe. And in some cases, I say burned, meaning a fire went around it, not burned up. There he is. Did you get technical details figured out?
Can you hear us?
You can hear me.
I can hear you.
All right, cool. The question was if we could recommend no burn policy between March 1st and May 15th, roughly, would we do it? And the reason that I say no, we wouldn't is we have very low rates of our nests getting impacted by fire. The reason for that is these birds are not selecting to put their nests in the areas that are slated to be burned. And Mike is admittedly the expert on prescribed fire. Do you want to step in on the whole idea of a 2 to 3 year rough and when fires are put through. So
Yeah, basically what we see is that when fire return intervals are fairly consistent, meaning the same stands are burned on a fairly consistent interval, most of our hens end up nesting in 1 and 2 year roughs. So in other words, stands that were burned last year or stands that were burned 2 years ago, not the stands that typically burn, which are 3 and 4 year roughs, at least on our study sites. And when we did similar work in longleaf sites, which were on a 2 year return interval, we saw that almost all nests were either in scrub areas that were along the outsides of burn units, or they were in 1 year roughs. The point's the same. The birds were in places that were not scheduled to be burned, and that's why we see such little nest loss on our sites.
yeah, that's verbatim, almost exactly what I was going to say, is that they're just not there. So that policy, though, and Mike and I were just talking about this, came from Lovett Williams. He was the one that originally stated that March 1st to May 15th in his turkey management or turkey land management little booklet. So I don't know where we're at. A bunch of them have filled in here. We're kind of doing some Q&A questions right now, Mike. So
I'm sorry I'm late. I literally was like, I'm dripping sweat. Like sweat. I left.
You want to introduce yourself? Nobody
yeah. Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Mike Chamberlain. I had a bird at 100 yards, and he's been strutting for an hour, and damn it, I just could not leave that bird. I'm sorry, but
it's okay.
He would not leave the little zone he was in, and we tried and tried and tried, and he just wouldn't. So we have been hustling the past 10 minutes. Sweat is dripping down me. I'm sorry, I'm a little tardy, but man, you have a turkey goblin, you don't leave. You just don't.
No. I told him you had technical difficulties and weren't able to get on, but it looks like that
was a technical difficulty. I was technically in a difficult situation, really.
Yeah. So, okay. From Scott, last weekend he called in some power jakes, 15 steps, had a hen decoy out. The birds could care less about the hen, never even looked away. They were fixated on me and left as quickly in the opposite direction. Sometimes they just don't need the decoys, man. That's all I'm going to say, Scott. I mean, I had birds last week that were scared of decoys. Said, nope, not walk down the field, saw decoys, and we ain't doing that, and left. And I've had others that have come in and, run right to the decoy. And I think that it's just important as birds are individuals. Every one of them is going to respond differently. There's no kind of broad paintbrush that I can put to this. What I will say is, being that they were juvenile males, I'm surprised that they didn't at least have a look, wander up, poke, and be like, what's this going on? It may have been that maybe your calling was too good, or just something else they were fixated on. But I mean, if you got birds rolling in on you that good, I suspect you're doing something right. So does Cody still carry a chopping axe around? I don't know.
Good question.
I would assume, yeah. Well, Scott's one of his buddies. I would assume so. I know he carries a torch and a really dirty old jacket in his truck most of the time. So, and then Scott, let me see, where are we at here?
We're at Leon.
Leon, okay. Livingston Parish. Oh, great. Okay, sure. And this is actually going to be, I think Mike and I at some point are actually going to do a small landowner discussion where we address the fact that not everybody manages, 20,000 acres worth of land. Food plots. You want to take this, and I feel like I've been talking an awful lot. So
yeah, the question.
I mean,
the question
on the screen.
Yeah. So a property that size, you have to understand that you're sharing your birds with a bunch of neighbors because of their home range sizes. So what I tell people in situations like yours, Leon, is try to identify your strengths and then identify your weaknesses. In other words, if you've got acreage that provides really good roosting cover, or you've got good winter habitat, or you've got good nesting or brooding, or whatever it is that's your strong suit, play to that strong suit. Try to enhance it as much as you can, and then identify neighbors that have things that are your weak points. In other words, if your birds, a common refrain I often hear is, well, I had birds in winter and they're gone, or they weren't here in winter and they just showed up. Well, that's translating to they're shifting their home ranges around. So if you want to enhance the birds that are using your property, try to identify your weaknesses, figure out where your neighbors play into those weaknesses, and see if you can address that through your neighbors. That's the way I look at it. And if everybody did that, then we'd all have a bigger footprint when it came to managing habitat for this bird, because we'd be influencing property that's not just our own, but outside of that. If your neighbors tell you to go take a hike, then what I would do is figure out again where your strengths are, and I would up those strengths as much as possible, because in a bird that has a home range the size of a turkey, 160 acres is a piece of their range. So if you can figure out where your strong points are and really try to enhance those, then you'll encourage more use from those birds, rather than spending a lot of resources trying to address your weaknesses. That's my philosophy.
That's fair.
Yeah, and it's also you can identify. I'll add to that. You can identify those strengths based on what Mike said. Is when you see the birds. If you suddenly start seeing hens all over your property in April, then your strength may be that you've got good nesting cover. But if your birds are kind of on your property all winter long and then they leave, you're a winter roost site. You got apparently maybe good hard mast is your particular site. You got good roosting trees. You got that particular set of conditions. Then just play to that. Because you can't, as Mike said, you can't on these small properties manage for every single thing, or you've got 2 acres here and 3 acres there. I did want to do the food plot. I would worry less about food plots, and I would worry more about management of the native vegetation on the ground. And if you're trying to support birds during the reproductive period specifically, because that's generally when people want to try and do stuff, you want to try and manage that native vegetation for nesting hens and broods and poults. That's really it. And Mike's got a really good saying that he says that he wants to be able to kind of squat down like a catcher and see over it, and he wants to be able to lay on his back and look underneath of his head and see kind of through it. So there's enough open vegetation for those poults to get down and get through, but it's not so tall that the mama can't see over it. And that's kind of that. What is it, like 18 inches, Mike? It's kind of anywhere between like 6 and 18 inches is a target.
Yeah. And Leon, the thing with food plots that I typically tell people is most things that are okay for whitetails in your part of the world, a mix of cereal grains and clovers, that's typically going to be pretty good for turkeys as well. The one thing I do ask people to consider is we have a real strong urge to mow stuff. That's like what we do. So when that food plot gets senescent in the spring, and that wheat and the oats, let's just say you planted wheat and oats with crimson and white clover, that senescent wheat and oats gets tall, it's brown, it's got a seed head on it. Don't mow that. Leave it, let the clover come up through it. We see a lot of brood use in the South in those food plots, because that clover is attracting a lot of insects, and those senescent wheat stalks and oat stalks provide some lateral and overhead cover that those poults can move around through and hide. So we see a lot of brood use of those plots. So I encourage people, hey, if you could kind of hold off on making it look pretty, if you will, until midsummer-ish, you really, if you're trying to prepare your plots for the next fall, you really don't need to start mowing them until mid to end summer anyway. So kind of let them sit there and go senescent, and we see a lot of brood activity in those plots, even really small ones.
Yeah, that's right. And I see Jeff's following up on a question earlier. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. I mean, it's never an easy trade-off to make, but I think that given the significantly low number of nests that are actually lost to fire, that the trade-off of having fire on the landscape, I mean, think about it like this. If you didn't have fire on the landscape in southern pine forest areas, what would your landscape look like? It wouldn't be hospitable to turkeys at all. So I think that the trade-off is a good trade-off. That if we lose a nest or two, but we create nesting habitat for hundreds of birds and brooding habitat for hundreds of poults, and I think that's a positive impact. I got asked a question on a podcast the other day, Jeff, from the Land and Legacy guys up your neck of the woods. They asked me about things like edge feathering, and one of the questions was, aren't you just creating a highway for predator species? Having all this edge, predators can just run down. I said perhaps, but would you rather not have vegetation that's good for the bird? So I think that the trade-off of having good vegetation for the bird outweighs the potential negatives of, you occasionally burn a nest up type of thing.
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably the most direct answer I got to that. Mike, you want to add anything?
Yeah, it just depends on scale. I mean, if your scale of fire is commensurate with this bird's ecology, which is in the dozens of acres and not the thousands, then you're not going to see, even with growing season fires, you're not going to see dramatic nest loss. But as the scale gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, then obviously it's kind of common sense that you would expect to see greater nest loss. But in the end of the day, if you're in the deep south and you're in a pine-dominated forest, this bird is inextricably linked to fire, and they need it. And the plant communities that fire produces is what drives this bird's ecology during the spring and early summer. So, yeah, it is a trade-off, Jeff, and you know that, and it's a good question. Would I rather lose the occasional nest and keep my plant communities where they need to be for this bird? Yes. Would I implement fire in a way that is at a spatial scale that's not commensurate with this bird? No, I would not recommend that. And I'm looking at a question, Tommy. Yeah, I'd still be there too, Tommy.
Yeah.
I said I was going to do this event.
You should have stayed though. If you had a shot at it, you could have stayed. None of us would have been mad.
We were doing fine.
Yeah.
This bird was Satan. He was going to stand there until dawn running in that spot. But man, he put on a show too. God, what a beautiful! I'm in an undisclosed location south of the Eastern's range, and man, he was gorgeous. And he.
Did you got pictures, video of it? Because
we got
share that with me later.
We got some killer video of it.
We would like. You're gonna have to drop comments later.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was pretty good footage.
We got one from
Chad. Yeah. Okay. Number of things that got the population. We actually weather is the number one. Meaning, I assume Chad's meeting with kind of the decline that we're seeing. Not really. I don't think it's weather. Weather's, at least in the southeastern United States, your western birds are more pulse driven, where, especially in the semi-arid regions, good rain at the right time causes a big pulse in Rios and Goulds. And then once you get up to Merriam's, late winter has some negative impacts. But in kind of the south and central part of the Midwestern part of the U.S., surprisingly enough, weather's pretty static. It's fairly stable. We don't see massive swings in annual precipitation. We don't see massive swings in temperature. It doesn't go from 0 to 100 in a given day. It does obviously have an impact, but I think that the bigger population issues that we deal with is the issues of large scale landscape change, landscape fragmentation, changing vegetative communities, and agricultural practices being more of a kind of edge to edge thing now as opposed to how they were historically. I don't know, Mike, you may have a different opinion on that, but
no, I agree. I'd say the short answer is that no, it's not the number one factor. So you kind of have things that are biotic factors, and you have things that are abiotic factors. And whether it's something that we can't control, it's an abiotic type factor. It influences populations, but it doesn't drive them at southern latitudes. So, like to Brett's point, in northern latitudes, yeah, you can see some significant problems with weather that have cascading population effects. We don't see that at southern latitudes. So, no, it's not the number one. It's certainly an influence, but like Brett said, we don't see dramatic changes in weather from one year to the next. Although we as human beings, we kind of think that we do. Last year, whatever. Last year was super cold spring, or this year was super dry spring, or this year was super wet spring. But in reality, this bird has functioned with these kind of dynamic weather patterns throughout, the time that it's been here on this planet. So we kind of see weather as being almost kind of a nuisance variable, not really a driver.
But as an aside, and this may, before we take the next one, it does, and we've got some really cool evidence that's coming out of one of Mike's PhD students, look like some of the weather variables impact gobbling activity.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that just briefly, just because I reviewed that paper for Patrick today?
Yeah. So we're analyzing all our gobbling data with weather that was collected either on the site or nearby, and we're talking millions of gobbles, like a lot of data, and it's pretty clear. But it's not rocket science. Any good turkey will tell you, rain not good, high wind not good, rising barometric pressure good, and that's pretty much what we see. That there are some things like rain and wind beyond about 8 miles an hour that start to cause declines in gobbling, but there's a strong signal of increasing barometric pressure after passing of a front, and that being positively associated with increases in gobbling that next day. We as turkey hunters, I'm not going to say we know that, and we're kind of proving the obvious here. But what the data do show is we're kind of putting an effect to each one of these variables, and some are much more impactful than others. So we'll have that stuff. We're going to post that stuff pretty soon on social media. I think people will be interested in it. It's pretty cool.
Where are you going to post? Are you going to post it to your channels?
Yeah, I'll put it on my Tuesday post at some point, and yeah.
Y'all check out his Tip Tuesday posts. They're awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're great. So Leon's got another question in here. This is a great question. We get this one a lot. The answer is by and large no. Juvenile males are not the breeding males. That's been kind of proven. There hasn't been a ton of work done on it. There's a great study in Texas that was done where they harvested a bunch of juvenile males and a bunch of juvenile females and looked at spermatogenesis and testes size and all kinds of stuff. And the long and short of it is no. There may occasionally, maybe, a really old juvenile male who was born from a first clutch at the very beginning of the breeding season might possibly have the ability. But when you think about it, and Mike can talk about, Mike's got a graduate student, actually, Sarah, that's been collecting testes off of harvested males the last couple of years, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And basically their testes just aren't formed. They're just not capable of producing the appropriate amounts of seminal fluid to impregnate females. So jakes, they will copulate. There's evidence of that, but they just don't provide the right physiological conditions to fertilize a female with any population level impacts. That's probably the most direct answer to that.
It's single-digit percentages of jakes that are capable of breeding, and they typically are later in the season. Some of the confusion about this stems from an earlier study that was done back in the 1960s that was a little suspect in how it was conducted, and the commercial industry, because in the commercial industry, juvenile males can copulate and fertilize clutches. But you have to understand, in those situations, those birds are much heavier. Their body condition is much higher, and there's an absence of toms in those situations where those juveniles can breed. In our wild populations, we don't have that. So you tend to see, and like Brett said, we're collecting testes out of hunter-harvested birds. And for the overwhelming majority of jakes, their testes are almost so small it's hard to find them. So those birds, based on the work done many years ago in Texas, are clearly not capable of fertilizing a clutch, although they will try to copulate.
Yep. So Jeremy's got birds that leave to breed. Yeah, that happens. But be happy you've got poults on camera, because that means that there's something that's occurring on your property.
That's exactly
that's what we're talking about.
Yep, I hear this all the time. They were here, they're gone, they come back, that type of thing. So Jeremy, you're just lacking a little something that is causing your birds to move off site and do their thing somewhere else and then come back. And part of that, honestly, may be out of your control. because these birds tend to have a fairly strong fidelity to these breeding areas that they've used, these kind of lekking areas, these display areas. And that's why you hear this notion, well, I've heard birds there for 20 years. Yeah, because that's a very important spot where reproduction occurs. So that's probably what you're seeing. Your birds are just shifting their range, going to a breeding area, and then coming back if they're successful. So I would tell you, just try, again, play to your strengths. Try to do the best you can to improve that brood habitat if you're seeing poults, because a lot of the data we're collecting suggests that brood habitat and brood behaviors may be something that is not good. We're seeing some issues with brood survival, and it stems from them having to move a lot. So if you've got poults that are showing up on your property and they don't have to move around a lot, you confer an improved survival to those broods.
No, that's a good answer. Who you got next, Anna? Yes. Generally speaking, yes, Andrew. So bobcats aren't there for the nest; they're there for the hens. Raccoons. Mike had done some work in Sherburne when he was at LSU a decade ago, looking at how raccoons moved across the landscape, and basically found that they weren't searching out nests. It was more of a haphazard if they found them. Snakes they're just out there, but yeah. How much nesting habitat? It comes down to this idea of usable space. The more usable space that you have available, the more likely the bird, in theory, will be successful, because there'd be more space that could potentially harbor a nesting individual that any particular predator would have to search. And that affects predator search efficiency, which then reduces the hit rate. So, as a general rule, it is. But probably within your question is the idea of trapping, to try and help out. And Mike has said it, and I'll say it. Recreational trapping and fur bearer harvest is enjoyable. It's a fun sport that many of us do. It's likely not a panacea for any particular property. There are a host of studies that have basically found that you can trap, and with consistent pressure, you can, bring down overall predator numbers, but nothing's ever really been shown, at least to my knowledge, in most upland game birds, where we suddenly see massive increases in productivity due to trapping impacts. That's not to dissuade anybody. That's just a lot of the species that eat turkey nests and eat turkeys can't be trapped anyway. So.
All right. And then Darren's got one.
All right. You want to do this one, Mike?
Yeah. Yes. Can a burn be too small? I mean, gosh, Darren, I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess in some situations,
it's the aggregate though, right?
A
bunch of little burns.
If you had some tiny little blocks, for instance, I'll give you an example. I did a research project in Louisiana one time where we had 7-acre burns that were kind of patchworked, and we saw a lot of tremendous insect response. Everything looked great. And part of the reason with that was, with a 7-acre burn, insects recolonize that block very, very quickly, because insects recolonize after a fire from the adjacent non-burn stands. So if I could get fire on the ground and I could only do 2 acres on a 1,000-acre property, well, I'd be reasonable in my expectations. But if I had a bunch of little tiny burn blocks and I was motivated to do it, then yeah, I'd do it, because we do see birds that are using. We had some research in South Georgia where we had burns that were 7 acres, 8 acres, 9 acres, and birds used the fire very quickly, as you can imagine, after it was burned. So I guess I'm sitting here hemming and hawing saying, well, yes and no, but if I could burn something myself, I'd burn it. That's Mike, but I'm kind of a pyro, and that's just me. Yeah, I'd burn it. Burn it, dude.
He says that. Yeah, he says that to the guy that literally smoked out the entire country club on Tuesday. So yeah, they were not happy with me. They all kept driving from the country club back here behind us, driving around, trying to see what was on fire, driving back. Had
I
my
shut a
burn
highway
plan
down
hung
one
on
time.
the post.
Yeah, I shut
Had
the
my
highway
burn
down
plan
one time.
posted on the just awesome. Great.
Yep, shut the whole road down. Shut everybody down. Yep, thought I was going to jail.
Mike Chamberlain did that. So, Jeremy, good deal. Did you see him Pulse? That's awesome. Leon's back with hidden shoes. No, this is a great question.
I like Leon. I
yeah,
think
Leon's
I'd like to
asking all
drink.
kinds of good
I'd like to drink a beer with Leon because
We
Leon.
are great now. We're going turkey hunting together this year.
Yeah, Leon's
Oh,
a thinker.
fantastic.
You can tell he gets an answer and then he goes through his checks to the next.
He gets
He's a thinker. I like that.
So here's the quick answer to that. There's a high likelihood we don't know, and I'm going to caveat that with yet, because we're currently collecting genetic data, and I have stacks of it at LSU. Mike has stacks of it at Georgia. We've been pulling together this information for at least 6 years now, Mike. Right? On the genetic, yeah, and we're talking thousands of eggs, of unique individual eggs. We're collecting blood samples off of birds, so we can identify parentage. So we don't know yet, but I would go with probably fairly high, because these birds are also known to do what's called extra-pair copulations. So she will copulate with her chosen male, and then maybe go lay an egg or maybe two, and then she'll perhaps copulate with a different male, because apparently something's funny, and I'm trying to answer your question.
Well, no, I'm laughing at the comments. I'm not laughing at you talking about population.
Right, so she may copulate with the prior, with her selected male, but then she'll also during the laying period potentially copulate with additional males, because sperm competition, it has fitness consequences. So there's a benefit to her to mix up the parentage of her clutch, and there's a population level benefit as well. So we don't have the answer on that right now, but we are looking at it right now. I mean, it is. Mike and I talked about it earlier today, actually. Did I miss anything you'd want to add in there, or is that?
Yeah, Leon, I'm gonna give you the short answer.
We don't short answer.
But what we're doing, that to Brett's point, we're collecting eggshells, membranes from all of our nest, and we're looking at how many toms are in those clutches. And we will be able to look at the timing of the onset of hunting and the time at which that nest hit the ground, and how many toms and which toms are represented in those clutches as the season progresses. That should let us back into, is there some signal going on, and how long does that take? So in other words, so you got this hen, she breeds with somebody March the 20th. Well, she's supposed to breed with them again, or a different tom. Well, if you're seeing a lot of single parent clutches, if not all single parent clutches, then that would suggest that she may not be choosing another gobbler. She may just be breeding with the dominant tom or whatever tom's available to her. And then the season starts and things kind of, change. And she's stored sperm from that initial copulation, and she moves on. We'll have the answers hopefully in about
3 years.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
From the last 6 years data.
Yeah, we're slowly pecking away at it. So it's expensive and time consuming.
I wanted to ask y'all too, Brett, you talked about earlier that y'all were doing some partner research.
Some what research?
Partner research? Were y'all doing partner research or no? I mean, between you and Mike, were y'all doing any research?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, everything, unfortunately for both of us, we're inextricably linked right now, I would say. It just sucks. I mean, every day it's some problem. Like, my equipment's broke, Brett. Can I borrow some? I mean, that's
that's what happened today.
That's today.
That's today.
Yeah, so the reason, I mean, Mike and I have been, as I suspect, about as active as collaborators as any two people can be, working on turkeys for at least a decade together right now. just combining all of our data, all of our information, because by doing that, we're able to broaden the scale at which we can evaluate questions, broaden the diversity of questions that we can evaluate, provide supporting information for the state agencies we work with, because Mike can, in Georgia, he can lean on what's being found in Louisiana. I can lean on what's being found in Georgia, and we can talk about similarities and differences and that kind of stuff. And it's been other than the fact that he always needs me to send him something, it's been a fairly positive experience, I think, for both of us.
Yeah.
Grad students work together, regularly and communicate. And we do a pretty good job, I would think, on coordinating on almost all the questions that we're asking and trying to keep things kind of funneled together. So,
we have our
the
moments.
one thing we didn't get to, we have our moments. The one thing we didn't get to that I said we talk about, and I'm glad Mike made it. Do you want to, and I can do it, but it probably might as well let you. Why don't you talk about the non-hunted bird study? Because Anna brought it up at the beginning and all the studies we were going on. Everything we've talked about today to this point has been on hunted birds. Why don't we tell them about the non-hunted study we're doing?
Yeah, so we're doing work on the Savannah River site, which is a couple 100,000 acres that for about the past 15-ish years, they've had a one weekend, very limited hunt for wounded warriors. They take about 20 times a year. Well, let me back up. And they only hunt a little section of this property. Well, the last 2 years, the hunts have been shut down. And so what we're in a situation now, we started this research. We have an unhunted population that's been sometimes most times on this property, they have absolutely no idea what hunting pressure is. So we've been collecting gobbling on this site we're in our 7th year now. And we're now catching hens and toms and putting GPS units on them, collecting genetic samples, doing the exact same stuff we do on all of our hunted sites. And what the reason is obvious. We're trying to come up with a benchmark for this is presumably how this bird functions normally. And how does that relate to our populations that are subjected to hunting of some intensity? We're working on a bunch of different sites. So some of our sites are very lightly hunted, very little pressure, and other sites are heavily hunted, like some of our public lands that are open access. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to kind of use this to inform agencies about, okay, well, here's a population in the absence of this activity. What difference, if any, are we seeing between this population and others? The gobbling data are pretty dramatic, as you can imagine. You don't have hunting, you have gobbling that extends well into the spring and early summer, as you should. But we really don't know about the other stuff, if you will, nest success and brood survival, et cetera, et cetera. We just got our kind of in our initial field season. I'm super interested in that work, and that's being funded entirely by the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. And I give them credit. They want answers. They want to know, where's that benchmark? So we're doing that, and hopefully in a few years we'll have that information.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's an exciting study, because the only even close to any data that's even close to this would have to have been restoration information whenever birds were being restored, but hunting wasn't allowed at that point. And the basic biology of a restored individuals that are restored, just how they act and everything is so different from populations that are generally stable. So Mike's right. This is going to give us a view, like just a small, probably the only window we're going to get into unhunted, native, left alone birds for Easterns in probably the United States.
Wow.
So it's going to be really insightful.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. I can't wait. I think I know we're going to find some things.
Jeff has a great question. That's a great question.
I was going to say, I think we're going to learn some stuff
that
flies in the face of what common sense would tell you. I think we're going to learn that this bird and how it behaves and how it's structured is a lot more complicated than we've given credit. I can't wait. And I may be proven wrong. And if I am, I'm retiring in like 6 years. So it doesn't matter. No, I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
email address no longer works.
I'm kidding. No, I am retiring in like 6 years, but I may be proven wrong, but I think we're going to learn some super cool stuff that
And
people.
when you said will you get the data on this? You said 3 years from now, probably. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. The PhD student that's on it, we'll be having stuff within 3 years to share for sure.
Okay.
Some of the work that's been done on Savannah River thus far is being published by one of my PhD students that was one of Brett's master students. He's including SRS data in his dissertation. So some of the gobbling data is going to start coming out and already has been published to some degree, but we're going to continue to publish that.
Okay.
That's a really good question from Jeff.
Yeah. The short answer is yes and no. What you've seen, so Jeff knows how these brood surveys in the South work, but a lot of people may not. So let me explain it very briefly. So the state agencies, they ask staff and sometimes turkey hunters and turkey enthusiasts to provide information to them on how many birds you see in the summer, what were they, if they were hens, did they have poults, how many poult, so, and they use those data to generate a poult per hen ratio. And that's a direct metric for production. So across the Southeast, in most states, long term, you're seeing anywhere from 1 to 2 poults per hen. A good year being up around 2, a bad year being 1, and in some states, occasionally less than 1, which is really poor. So what's happened on Savannah Riverside is the staff that work there have been collecting comparable data for the past, I think, I don't have it in front of me. I think it's 18 years, 18 or 20 years.
Okay.
Been collecting these data. And what they show clearly is that poult per hen ratios have been well over 2.5 to 3 during that same time period, the last 20 years. But to Jeff's point, there has been a decline. It used to be like 4, 4.1 or 4.2 or something like that, which is really good production. And now it has declined on this site, but it hasn't declined at the magnitude that we've seen in other populations. So there's something going on, like, and I think Brett said this earlier, Savannah Riverside is influenced by some of the same issues that influence our greater landscapes. Changes in timber rotations, changes in forest management, changes in fire rotation, these things that influence pine-dominated forest across the South also influence SRS. So I think what we're going to end up seeing is, the data show there's also this trend that's declining on this site, but the magnitude of that decline is dramatically less than what we're seeing in our other populations.
No, that's a good answer. So I'm gonna jump on. Absolutely not, Alan. Man, I share your frustration.
No,
my place.
hell
my
no.
family,
I'm just doing it a few minutes ago.
I'm
out there, man.
Literally going next week. Yeah,
get out there.
We've never even had turkeys on our farm in Illinois until a few years back, and I ain't stopping. It gets frustrating. Sometimes conditions change. You saw a nest destroyed on camera by armadillos, raccoon, and coyotes. Man, I can show you crested caracaras, red-tailed hawks, snakes, bobcats, pigs. What else have I had? Ravens, blue jays. I had a squirrel carry one off once. But absolutely not. It is certainly not time to give up. Don't. Absolutely no.
Now realize.
Now, I don't know exactly where you're at, but no.
Yeah. My answer to that is absolutely not. We're in a fight now, and we need turkey hunters to be willing to not give up, because they're turkey hunters. We're the ones that are the economic engine that drive this train. We're the ones that put money in state coffers that are going to allow this bird to have sustainable populations. It may not be at the levels that we had 20 or 30 years ago, and that may be the new normal. But I would say, again, identify what you can do in your space and do it. And identify whether that's all I can do is buy a license, Mike. Okay, then buy a license and keep going. You can impact 10 acres and buy a license. Do that. If you've got a neighbor that owns 1,000 acres and they're your good buddies, or you're dating their daughter, or whatever you're doing, and you can get on that track, then do it. Everything you can do to have a positive impact on this bird. If we all do that, then these frustrations are going to go away. We're still not going to have turkeys in these historically high numbers. I don't think we'll ever go back to that, because our landscape is different than it was 30 years ago. But what we're going to have to do is collectively put our heads together and figure out ways that we can work together to impact the biggest footprint that we possibly can. If we can do that, then we're going to move the needle. We've got to do that as turkey hunters, because we're the ones that are vested in this resource. We're the ones that are paying the bills for state agencies to manage for populations of this bird. So we're going to have to work together.
Yeah, and I'll say this. Tommy's got me, but you guys have a really good turkey biologist in your state, the Raina. Tayo's up there.
Yep.
So reach out. Give her an email, give her a call. She's with it's a Department of Conservation up there. Is it DOC?
I think it's
or Department of Wildlife
Conservation. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it's Missouri Department of Conservation. Her name is Raina Tayo. Give her a call. She's fantastic. She did a master's degree studying turkeys, I think, in the Dakotas.
Yep, South Dakota.
Tons of knowledge. And see what she's got to say. So, so that'd be the first spot. And join NWTF. I see Tommy throwing it up there. Absolutely. So I did my re-up the other day. So.
Guys,
that's good.
I think that's pretty much it. Y'all want to wrap up?
Did we talk everybody down? All right. So
leave it.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well,
I got time to go roost a bird.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like, it's not dark yet. I've got time to go roost a bird.
Yeah. Look, we can wrap up. So the only thing we'll have Anna add in both Mike and mine social media stuff at the end of the chat. So, and it'll be posted on YouTube, right?
It will be posted. Yeah, this video will be posted later on YouTube, probably by tomorrow.
All right.
I will go ahead. Oh, we have a few more.
Oh, no, it's all right. That's all right. I'll jump in there. And Mike, if you need to go roost a bird, I can finish up for us. Go.
Man,
it's all right, man.
Killing me, Jeff.
No, do it.
I
yes,
think I got like 24 minutes.
Okay. So, yes, Jeff, there is. SRS is a big contiguous block of forested habitat, and it's significantly more fragmented around it.
I was just there yesterday, and Jeff, I'll tell you what it looks like to me. It looks like almost all of the Piedmont forest that I've seen in the Southeast. It looks just like that. Pine dominated, pine hardwood, riparian areas that are hardwood, some open areas, swamps. If you were to take a cross section of the Piedmont of the Southeast and just pick a hardwood pine or pine hardwood forest, depending on where you're at, and drive out to it and open your eyes, and then you went to SRS, it looks the same. It looks like, in fact, I spent a lot of time on SRS yesterday. And I've been running everywhere, but I was reassured the more I saw of the site, because we went to some weird places yesterday. The more I saw, the more reassured I was that the data are very comparable to what, the sites that we're studying across the Southeast, because it's huge, and it covers so many different vegetation communities, RCW areas. I mean, you name it, it's on this site. I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be good stuff. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I hope I pronounced this right. I'm sorry if is it Lana? Oh man, that's a great question. Live in Arkansas.
Number one biggest mistake. I can tell you what the biggest mistake is. The biggest mistake.
This should be
not being patient. I've made this mistake. In fact, I just made this mistake a little while ago. Be patient. Be patient and be still and enjoy yourself. And if you can hunt until 9 o'clock, If you think you can hunt until 9:30, stay there. If you think you can stay until 10, stay there. Be patient and soak up what's around you, and you'll realize that turkey hunting is a lot more than just the hunt. It's being out at this time of year when the world is opening up and it's awakening. Be patient and try to stick it out. Don't get frustrated. You're going to get your butt handed to you by birds. I get my butt handed to me more than often than not, and just take your lumps and go from there. The number one tip, I guess, for those are about the same, because a lack of patience will kill you. In my opinion, a lack of patience. Now, I know there's some people watching this. No, you're full of it. I'm running gun and doing this and that. Yeah, you can kill turkeys, but I guess when you get to be 49 years old, like I am, patience becomes a virtue. So I'd say be patient.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would say that, it's exciting to go.
Call too much. Don't call, don't feel like you got to be yapping the whole time.
You don't have to have 14 decoys out there. They don't need all that. I think that turkey hunting is not about the harvest of the turkey. Turkey hunting is about the experience that goes along with the attempt to have the opportunity to get fortunate enough to harvest a turkey. And I think that if you sit back and, recognize that my biggest tip is to enjoy the fact that you get to go out in the woods and you get to enjoy all the things that go along with it. I mean, harvesting a bird is just icing on the cake, and don't call too much.
Yeah, I would also say that if you're interested in getting into turkey hunting, consider buying some of the books that are like seminal turkey hunting books in this, 10th Legion. Some of these other books that chronicle in a really humorous way the experiences that turkey hunters have. Read those books, and then you're going to realize that you're going to get yourself in every single one of those positions that these authors, with a bit of wit and humor, detail for us. I personally would recommend you do that. Get you some turkey hunting books that are kind of the holy grail, if you will, and read them, and you'll enjoy them. And then when you're out there chasing this bird, you're going to find yourself in those same positions, and you're going to laugh. And sometimes having a laugh when you're getting beat by a bird with a brain that's that big is the best medicine.
Yeah. So, but good luck, and let us know how it turns out for you.
All right, guys, we will wrap.
All right, Mike's got to go roost a bird. I can just see him. He's just itching. It's like,
look, I've got somebody. There's somebody. My phone is. There's somebody standing like right up there through the window. Like, come on, man. We got 16 minutes. We got 16 minutes. They're going to be in the tree.
Thank y'all both for being here, and I'll put their social media handles in the comments because they share a lot of the research they do, and it's really interesting to learn about it. So thank y'all again.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, y'all.
All right. Good luck, brother. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, man. See you.